There is a town in England where a boy born today can expect to become seriously ill before he turns 51. There are streets in the north where houses sell for less than a second-hand car. And right now, 303,185 homes across England sit long-term empty, not between tenants, not under renovation, just abandoned. That figure is the highest since 2011, up 14% in a single year and over 50% higher than when the last national empty homes programme ended in 2016. Total vacancy across all categories now exceeds 1 million homes. At the same time, over 350,000 people are without stable housing. The contradiction is staggering. The explanation, when you look at it town by town, is not mysterious. Empty homes concentrate where the economy collapsed and never recovered, where the population that once filled them has left, aged out, or simply cannot sustain the housing market around them. What follows are 9 of those places, not as a judgment on the people who live there, but as an honest account of what the data, from the government's own Indices of Deprivation 2025, Centre for Cities, the ONS, and published employment and health figures says about where they stand in 2026. 1. Blackpool, Lancashire. Start with the worst. The government's own Indices of Deprivation 2025 confirmed what Blackpool residents have known for decades. Blackpool is the single most deprived local authority in all of England. 7 of the 10 most deprived neighbourhoods in the entire country sit inside Blackpool's boundaries, 7 out of 10 in one town. 40.4% of all Blackpool neighbourhoods fall within the 10% most deprived nationally, making it the most concentrated pocket of deprivation in England by a considerable margin. The health data is the number that should stop the conversation. The Health Foundation's analysis, confirmed by ONS Healthy Life Expectancy data for 2022 to 2024, records that healthy life expectancy for men in Blackpool is 50.9 years, as the lowest of any local authority in England for males. A boy born in Blackpool today can statistically expect to develop a serious chronic illness before he turns 51, at a time when the national average healthy life expectancy for men is 61.5 years. That is a gap of more than a decade. On male life expectancy overall, Blackpool Council published provisional OHID data in June 2026 showing an improvement. Life expectancy for boys now stands at 74.2 years for 2023 to 2025, up from 73.2 in the previous period. That improvement is real and worth acknowledging. It does not change the fact that Blackpool remains 5.8 years below the England average for male life expectancy, and that the healthy life expectancy figure of 50.9 years is not yet showing the same trajectory. The housing picture explains the demographic trap. Around 8,000 people move into Blackpool each year, and roughly 2/3 arrive already receiving universal credit. The Victorian boarding houses that once housed summer visitors have been subdivided into bedsits over decades, creating a revolving door through which the country's most economically vulnerable people are concentrated into its most deprived postcodes. The high street vacancy rate sits at 17.6%, the third highest in the United Kingdom according to Centre for Cities. 3 entire seafront hotels stand boarded and derelict on the promenade. The government allocated Blackpool £40 million through levelling up investment, directed primarily at relocating the Magistrates' Court to unlock central redevelopment. When 7 of England's 10 most deprived neighbourhoods sit inside one town's boundaries, £40 million is a sticking plaster on a wound that requires surgery, and the surgery has not been scheduled. 2. Middlesbrough, North Yorkshire. In October 2015, the SSI Redcar Steelworks shut. 1,700 direct jobs disappeared overnight. Another 1,000 across the supply chain followed within weeks. Nearly 11 years later, the Indices of Deprivation 2025 recorded that 50% of Middlesbrough's neighbourhoods are classified as highly deprived, giving it the highest such proportion of any of the 296 council areas in England. The BBC reported on this directly when the data was published. The ONS employment rate for the Middlesbrough area sits at 64.4% against a national figure of 75.5%. Sky News reporting from Middlesbrough found specific wards where 6 out of every 7 children are growing up in poverty. The Tees Valley Freeport carries genuine ambition, and offshore wind contracts represent a real industrial opportunity for the region. But Sheffield Hallam University researchers have found that improved headline employment figures in the Tees Valley mask a significant spike in long-term sickness benefit claims. People who want to work but physically cannot, who have slipped off the official unemployment count and onto a waiting list of chronic ill health that reflects what happens to communities when industrial collapse goes unaddressed for a generation. The city centre vacancy rate sits around 14%. Middlesbrough records among the highest housing vacancy rates in England. The announcements keep arriving. The deep structural indicators keep measuring the same underlying reality. 3. Sunderland, Tyne and Wear. Sunderland is the largest British urban area to have lost population outright between the two most recent censuses, falling from 275,500 to 274,200, a decline of 0.5%. Centre for Cities ranked it the slowest growing of all 58 UK primary urban areas. The age profile of who left tells you everything about what that means for the long-term future. Residents aged 35 to 49 fell by 14.5% in a single decade. Working families, the people who anchor a community economically, socially, and demographically, departed in large numbers and have not been replaced. The historical dimension makes the present position more painful, not less. During the Second World War, the shipyards on the River Wear produced 27% of Britain's entire merchant fleet tonnage. The last Wearside shipyard closed in December 1988, ending 6 centuries of continuous shipbuilding. Nissan, built at Washington as the industry that would replace that tradition, became the UK's largest manufacturing site. Then in June 2025, Nissan announced it would seek voluntary redundancies at Sunderland, targeting around 250 roles d'Aros as part of a global restructuring program. Separately, Nissan confirmed the closure of one of its 2 Sunderland production lines and the elimination of 900 jobs across Europe. BBC reporting confirmed the scale. Nissan's executives told MPs that the UK has become one of the most expensive places to operate a car factory in the world, with the Sunderland plant paying more for electricity than any other Nissan facility globally. The replacement industry is being priced out of the city it was supposed to save. 4. Bradford, West Yorkshire Bradford, is the only major UK city with a population above 350,000 where the average house price sits below £140,000. Bradford Council narrowly avoided issuing a Section 114 notice, acknowledging a shortfall of £40 million that required government intervention and major service cuts, with BBC reporting in 2026 confirming council tax rises as the authority continued navigating an extraordinarily difficult financial position. The textile industry that built Bradford has been gone for decades, but Bradford's demographic profile makes it genuinely distinct from every other town on this list. Bradford has one of the youngest populations of any English city. It does not have an ageing problem. It has a youth opportunity problem. End Child Poverty's 2025 analysis places Bradford West constituency at 57% child poverty and Bradford East at 55%. The Manningham ward of Bradford has the second highest child poverty rate in the UK at 72%. Nearly 3 in 4 children in that street are growing up below the poverty line, according to Guardian reporting citing the same dataset. The gap between Bradford's economic output per person and the national average has widened every year for 15 consecutive years. The young people are there in significant growing numbers. The jobs, the investment, and the infrastructure to match that demographic potential are not. 5. Stoke-on-Trent, Staffordshire. Stoke was Wedgwood, Royal Dalton, Spode, brands that defined British craftsmanship for 2 centuries. Between 1980 and 2010, the potteries lost over 30,000 manufacturing jobs. The population stagnated. The high street hollowed out. Vacancy rates across the 6 town centres of Hanley, Longton, Fenton, Tunstall, Burslem and Stoke remain among the highest in England. A December 2025 report from Staffordshire University described a deepening poverty crisis in Stoke-on-Trent, driven by sustained cuts to health, welfare and social services over more than a decade. The cheapness of Stoke's housing stock has attracted a specific and damaging pattern that deserves direct attention. London councils facing a homelessness budget overspend estimated at over £330 million in 2024 to 2025 have been placing homeless families in Stoke because the cost of accommodation is dramatically lower than in the capital. The Lead reported in 2025 that out-of-area placements were continuing at scale across the North and Midlands, concentrating additional economic vulnerability into communities already carrying significant deprivation. By June 2025, 81% of all households in temporary accommodation placed out of area were London cases, according to Commons Library analysis of MHCLG data. Buy-to-let investors have purchased entire terraced streets, rented them to tenants on housing benefit, and extracted rental income without investing in maintenance, a practice that degrades housing stock in already challenged neighbourhoods. The government questioned the scale and legality of out-of-area placements in 2026. The practice had been running for years before anyone moved to stop it. 6. Grimsby, Lincolnshire. Grimsby reached its peak in the 1950s as the largest and busiest fishing port in the world. The deep-sea fishing industry employed tens of thousands of people directly and indirectly, from the crews and dock workers to the processing plants and supply chains that sustained an entire regional economy. By 2026, that fleet has effectively ceased to exist. The industry's collapse, accelerated by the cod wars with Iceland through the 1970s and by quota rules that removed the economic anchor of an entire region, was never meaningfully replaced. Great Grimsby now sits in the bottom 10% of English local authorities for deprivation. The high street vacancy rate exceeds 15%. Median wages in Grimsby run among the lowest of any English town. The Telegraph's reporting from March 2025 identified the East Marsh area of Grimsby as having the highest youth unemployment in the country, describing a generational disconnection from mainstream economic life that researchers characterized as structural rather than cyclical. The Humber Freeport carries investment potential. It launched with the stated ambition of generating at least 7,000 new jobs across the region, and the 2026 State of the Humber report from Arup outlined an ambitious regional economic strategy. But as Centre for Cities has consistently documented, the journey from investment announcement to actual employment to measurable wage improvement is measured in years and decades, not months. Grimsby has been waiting for that journey to complete for a very long time. 7. Burnley, Lancashire. The UK House Price Index for October 2025 recorded Burnley as carrying the cheapest average house prices of any local authority in England at £131,000. The ONS May 2026 provisional figure shows £130,000. Still the cheapest in England even after a 4.3% annual rise. Within that already low average, there are streets where terraced houses regularly sell for under £50,000. At those prices, the properties are not assets in any conventional financial sense. The cost of bringing them up to the decent home standard frequently exceeds their market value, which is precisely why so many sit long-term empty, and why Action on Empty Homes data consistently shows vacancy concentrated in exactly these northern mill towns. The cotton mills that built Burnley closed across the 1970s and 1980s. Nothing replaced them at anything approaching the same scale of employment. The Indices of Deprivation 2025 record that 40% of Burnley's neighbourhoods fall within the most deprived 10% nationally, a proportion that places Burnley second only to Blackpool among all English local authorities. The town's working-age population has been declining for 2 decades as young graduates leave for Manchester and Leeds and do not return. Centre for Cities' analysis of productivity gaps has shown that the economic output difference between Burnley and the national average now rivals some of the most extreme regional divergences in developed economies. The mills are gone. The gap they left behind is still widening. 8. Hartlepool, County Durham. Hartlepool's nuclear power station at Seaton Carew has been the town's most significant anchor employer following the contraction of its steel and shipbuilding industries. EDF confirmed an extension of the station's operational life to March 2028. A private firm has expressed interest in building replacement reactors on the site. The BBC has reported that a final government decision on Hartlepool's nuclear future may not come until next year, with any new construction timeline extending well beyond a conventional property or economic investment horizon. In March 2026, The Office for Nuclear Regulation placed Hartlepool Nuclear Power Station into significantly enhanced regulatory attention, a formal escalation reflecting concerns about health and safety performance. The town currently sits in genuine uncertainty about the fate of its most important remaining economic pillar, at the precise moment that pillar's regulatory standing has deteriorated. The health data for Hartlepool is among the worst in England. The Health Foundation and ONS confirm that healthy life expectancy for women in Hartlepool is 51.2 years, the lowest of any local authority in England for females. Male healthy life expectancy is 52.1 years, the second lowest nationally after Blackpool. These are not abstract statistics. They reflect what happens to communities when industrial collapse goes unaddressed for a generation, when public health investment retreats, and when formal care services are systematically reduced. Houses in certain Hartlepool streets sell at auction for under £20,000. They are not investments, they are liabilities, sitting empty because the market that would justify renovating them no longer exists at the required scale. 9. Birkenhead, Merseyside. Birkenhead sits across the River Mersey from Liverpool, functionally close enough to the city to seem connected, economically distant enough to have developed its own distinct pattern of decline. The 2021 census recorded Wirral, the borough that contains Birkenhead, as having added just 400 people across an entire decade, a population growth rate of approximately 0.1%. The census simultaneously recorded that 5.2% of all 150,920 properties in Wirral were empty, 7,870 homes, up from 3.7% a decade earlier. The direction of travel is clear. Fewer people and more empty homes in the same borough at the same time. Centre for Cities Checking Out report from July 2025 identified Birkenhead as having the largest retail spending leakage of any city in the United Kingdom. 7.5% of all resident spending crosses the river to Liverpool rather than remaining in Birkenhead's local economy. When the spending leaves, the businesses that depend on it follow. When the businesses close, the reasons for remaining diminish. Wirral Council brought 630 long-term empty homes back into use in a single year, an 83% increase, and a figure presented as a success story. Operationally it is, but it also tells you precisely how many homes were sitting idle in a borough, adding barely 400 residents per decade, where the pyramids and pyramid shopping centres, bought by the local council specifically to revive the town centre, have seen values fall further, and where natural population change shows more deaths than births. Birkenhead is not collapsing spectacularly. It is diminishing quietly, consistently, and in one direction.